It was one of many attempts to derail his New York City criminal trial, and it failed again. Today, a New York appellate court rejected Donald Trump's bid to have Judge Juan Merchan recused from the case, citing Merchan's daughter's work consulting for Democratic clients. The judges ruled that Trump's defense team failed to prove that Judge Merchan overstepped his authority by refusing to recuse himself. It also upheld Merchan's decision, denying Trump's argument that some of Trump's social media posts were covered by presidential immunity. Now, these denials are all happening as we await a consequential ruling from Judge Merchan on jury instructions, which will guide the jury as it tries to reach a verdict. Joining me now is Neal Katyal, former U.S. Acting Solicitor General and now an MSNBC legal analyst. Neal, it's great to see you. I have a lot of questions here. Pertaining first to the appeals court ruling, there have been so many denials throughout this trial. I assume that's the throw the spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks to it school of defense strategy. Does it have any kind of meaningful impact, though, in the bigger picture here?
Yeah, so it's a spaghetti strategy at the wall. It's also just kind of Trump's MO, being a loser. He lost once again, as he does time and again in the New York court system. So, the idea that this judge should be recused, I think, is laughable. I mean, this is a judge who's, if anything, bending over backwards to accommodate Trump and his antics. Like, just take all of Trump's defiance of the gag order. I would just tell you, Alex, if you or I did that, we'd be like going straight to jail. But Trump got off from that because this judge has given the benefit of every doubt. Today, also, the judge ruled against Trump's motion to try and say venue, the place where the trial's occurring in Manhattan, was impermissible because there was too much pretrial publicity and he couldn't get a fair trial. And it is true, there's a lot of pretrial publicity, a lot of publicity that he himself has ginned up in part. But legally, that's always been a loser because in order to change venue, you have to show some other place that doesn't have as much pretrial publicity. And of course, everywhere is following this case. It was the same argument when I prosecuted George Floyd as a special prosecutor. When I prosecuted the George Floyd murder, Derek Chauvin said, change venue. I can't get a fair trial in Minneapolis. And the trial judge there said, absolutely not. It's the same trial you get anywhere else. So none of this is surprising. And we're going to move to the main event, as you say, jury instructions, summation next week, and ultimately a jury verdict.
What are your, what are your sort of biggest questions around the jury instructions? We went through some of them with Duncan Levin and Christy Greenberg earlier this week, but I wonder if there's a particular looming question about the guidance that's going to be given to the jury that you're going to be focused in on as we get those instructions.
Yeah, and so for our viewers, like the jury instructions are actually the legal standards that the judge tells the jury. What are the elements that they're going to need to find as a jury in order to convict Trump? And, the money trial here, this trial is so intense, frankly, you think even the jury instructions are going to need an attorney at some point. But the major point of contention, I think, is the level of criminal mens rea, criminal intent. The defense is arguing for very specific language that would require the jury to find that Trump specifically intended to commit a campaign finance violation. And the prosecution, by contrast, is arguing for something more lenient. That's really important because that's one of the key ways in which this crime becomes not just a misdemeanor of falsifying business records, but rather a very serious campaign finance violation, a felony with the possibility of jail time.
When we talk about what the jury is going to be guided towards, what kind of instructions they're going to get, Trump did not testify in this case, despite his bloviating and suggestion and explicit assertion that he was going to testify. He explained why he didn't take the stand to ABC, I believe it was yesterday. Let us take a listen to his explanation. It's a full screen. Okay, I'm going to read it. Anything I did, he said, anything I did in the past, they can bring everything up. And you know what? I've had a great past, but anything. The other reason is because they have no case. In other words, why testify when they have no case? I don't do a great Donald Trump, Neal, but you get the gist of things, which is anything but saying I can't take the stand because I would be my worst possible witness in my own defense. Is that going to be something? Is the jury going to find out why Trump didn't take the stand? We know that there are a couple of key witnesses in all of this that didn't take the stand, and I would assume the jury has to be told why they didn't take the stand.
Yeah, so I called this, I think, on your show more than a month ago, and I said, look, Trump is all bloviating. He's going to testify and blah, blah. But of course, he's not going to testify. And he's not going to testify for two simple reasons. Number one, he's a chicken. And number two, his attorneys would never let him testify because there's too great a risk that he is going to perjure himself on the stand. And I further said, of course, he's going to blame it on someone else. He'll blame it on, the fact that there's no case or something like that. That's, of course, exactly what he did. All the things that he was saying about there being no case, he said a month ago. But at that point, of course, he was bloviating about testifying. Now he's not. Now, the jury is going to be instructed, and this is part of our Fifth Amendment, that they can't infer anything negative about Donald Trump from his decision not to take the stand. And that's absolutely his right. They're going to be told it expressly in the jury instructions. That doesn't say anything about the court of public opinion, where there is no Fifth Amendment. And of course, politicians act in a public environment. And if they don't take the stand, there's usually a good reason for that, which is not, oh, there's no case. It's because they're worried about showing up on the stand and having to tell the truth. And so I think we can make a certain inference from that. The fact that there's witness after witness who said Trump did it, and he's just sitting there silently, sitting on his hands. That tells us, I think, what we need to know.
When you talk about drawing inferences, Neil, I wonder, how you think the closing arguments are going to go based on what we saw on the last day of testimony. Bob Costello having quite a time on the stand with Judge Merchan and others. Where do you think where do you think they go from here, and what are your expectations?
So the Trump defense is really simple. This is not a case about Donald Trump. It's a case about Michael Cohen and his credibility. This is a guy who they're going to say has lied repeatedly, lied to the point where he had to go to jail, and you can't trust him. And the prosecution is going to say, A, there are a lot of reasons to trust him now, but B, you don't have to trust him because there's all sorts of corroborating documentary evidence. And someone like Trump, who, there's testimony that says he meticulously counted every cent going out of his accounts, the idea that he would have tolerated his attorney spending hundreds of thousands of dollars without his permission is just so against the Trump modus operandi as to make it unbelievable. So I think that's going to be the debate. Remember, in our system, the jury, all 12 of them have to find Trump guilty in order for him to be convicted. If one person says he didn't do it, then he can't be convicted. There may be a mistrial in that hung jury. And at that point, you'll have perhaps another trial. And I do think some of Trump's defense tactics in the case, particularly over Costello, would give the prosecution ample grounds to have a retrial. So we could be back here again if Trump doesn't get convicted next week.
You just had to say another trial, didn't you, Neil? We're not ready for that talk yet. Sir, it is great to talk with you and get your expertise on all of this. Really appreciate you, Neil Katyal. Thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
Last year, a federal court unanimously ruled that the Republican legislature in South Carolina had engaged in illegal racial gerrymandering, diluting the power of the state's black voters. But today, the Supreme Court reversed that decision. Writing for the majority, Justice Alito argued that the courts must give South Carolina Republicans the benefit of the doubt when they say that race had nothing to do with how they drew the congressional maps. Quoting from Alito's opinion, when a federal court finds that race drove a legislature's districting decisions, it is declaring that the legislature engaged in offensive and demeaning conduct that bears an uncomfortable resemblance to political apartheid. We should not be quick to hurl such accusations at the political branches. In other words, it's pretty offensive to accuse South Carolina Republicans of racism, so let's not. And if there's no racism, then there's nothing to see here, folks. But if Alito's decision seemed absurd and also extreme, another Reagan administration alum, a man by the name of Clarence Thomas, took this all one step further. In his concurring opinion, Justice Thomas argued that the federal judiciary should have no role in settling disputes about any election maps. And then he called into question a half-century of precedent following from the court's landmark decision in Brown v. Board of Education. I mean, hey, why not? Abortion, affirmative action, voting rights, all of them already on the chopping block. Why not go for desegregation, too? This is what it looks like when you fill government with political zealots. The administration may end, but the people do not necessarily go away. They just become the next generation of serious people, experienced enough for a confirmation hearing and young enough for a lifetime appointment. Joining me now is Ari Berman, national voting rights correspondent at Mother Jones. He is also the author of the new book, Minority Rule, The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It. Also joining me is Dahlia Lithwick, Slate's senior editor, writing about the courts and the law. Thank you both for joining me on this, well, monumental day, and gravely so. Ari, first, just let's talk about the project here. I mean, we did not get to this moment by chance, and there's a reason I wanted to retrace everything happening in the Reagan 80s. This is a multi-decade project on the part of the right.
I was having PTSD from reliving my last book and then going into my new one because this is history that's very familiar to me, which is that the conservative movement specifically put people that were opposed to the civil rights movement, opposed to voting rights, opposed to these policies in positions of power to do things through the courts that they knew they could not do through the normal political process. They would not have been able to get rid of the Voting Rights Act, overturn Roe v. Wade through the normal political process. So they said, let's stack the courts. Let's construct an anti-democratic court that will then do all these anti-democratic things that we can't do through the normal political process. And we're seeing this decades-long strategy play out today, where they're accomplishing all the things they wanted. They are overturning Roe v. Wade. They are gutting the Voting Rights Act to such a point that it's barely effective. And this didn't happen by chance. Basically, the conservative movement has made the courts their test case for minority rule because they know that the court, at least in their hopes, will be insulated from political accountability. And certainly the way the justices are acting, they feel like they are insulated from political accountability.
Yeah, I mean, this week of all weeks, Dahlia, when we find out that Justice Alito has flags bearing the hallmark of the insurrectionist movement flying above more than one of his homes, here he is again going against the will of the people, the will of our sort of democratic process to undermine voting rights. What is your reaction to the decision today?
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is the right one, Alex, which is these are both stories of minority rule and a complete lack of accountability. And I really want to make one more pitch to folks who are listening that these are the same story, that we tend to sort of talk about, you know, Alito, malfeasance, weird behavior, upside down flags as a kind of a one story, and then the doctrine that comes out of the court as another. And they are so intrinsically connected because they are both stories of what it is to create a judiciary that is so utterly protected from public disdain, public displeasure, from the sense that they are subverting democracy as we know it. And I think both the decision today and Justice Alito's public conduct, where he's just flouting every single ethics and sort of appearance constraint, they are of a piece. They are both stories of what it is to be utterly untouchable in this moment.
This is going to have implications, and beyond the conservative project, there's the immediate impact on our elections and how we have a representative democracy or not. Ari, this is happening in South Carolina, but how do you see this decision echoing across other states?
Well, you're right. I mean, what it does is it gives Republicans another House seat, and the House is going to be very close. So every seat matters. And they also ran out the clock in this case in the way that they're doing with the immunity case, because a lower court was already forced to basically say Republicans can keep this district, even though they called it a stark racial gerrymander. Then the Supreme Court, of course, went further, and now they're making it very difficult to challenge racial gerrymandering in the future. And if I can just contextualize this for a second, they've already gutted the Voting Rights Act twice.
Right.
So they've already ripped the heart out of the Voting Rights Act. They have also said that partisan gerrymandering cannot be challenged in federal court, which is absolutely insane. You could draw a map where one party gets 30% of the votes, 70% of the seats, and they'll say you can't even challenge it, let alone strike it down. So racial gerrymandering is really one of the only things you can still challenge in federal court when it comes to voting rights. Now they're saying basically racial gerrymandering is going to be a lot harder to challenge too, because essentially what Alito's saying, let's give the benefit of the doubt to the people that are doing the discriminating,
yes,
as opposed to those who are facing discrimination.
Who are fighting it.
And this is a very consistent theme from the court. Their sympathies lie with people that are suppressing votes, diluting votes, making it harder to vote, as opposed to those people that are facing those obstacles to voting.
Would you say, Dahlia, that there's inherent? I mean, I'm not asking this rhetorically. I am actually asking this. In saying that race has nothing to do with this, they are also just revealing the racial agenda that they operate within and under. Is that unfair? Because 9 times out of 10, these justices, with the exception of one ruling earlier this year, are always going with the white people.
Right. This is like a layer cake of gaslighting, Alex. I mean, there's so many levels of, we're just trying to be fair. We're just going to defer to the legislature. We're just going to say that whatever the rules are for finding error in the district court finding, there's extensive findings from the lower court, the 3-judge panel, that Alito just bats away. I don't find any of this to be indicative of, a racial gerrymander. So there's just layers and layers and layers of denialism. And maybe the cherry on top, although there's so many cherries on top of this cake, is when Justice Alito literally tells Justice Kagan that an opinion that she wrote that stands for the opposite proposition in 2017, that his opinion is actually truer to that than hers. And when she says in her dissent, like, no, you've just completely subverted everything I wrote, he's like, oh, honey, listen to me. So there's just every single check that was supposed to protect disadvantaged racial minorities from having their power suppressed over centuries. Every one of those checks is batted away under the theory that this was never a problem. It's certainly not a problem now.
As chilling as all of the writing in this Sam Alito's opinion is, Ari, there's Clarence Thomas's concur. Yeah, exactly. That as if anyone needed to be more fearful of where we're headed as a country. He's basically suggesting Brown v. Board of Education has there's nothing that should really follow from that. It has no teeth. We shouldn't be involved in the court should not be involved in this business. I mean, reminder, Clarence Thomas was put on the court to replace Thurgood Marshall. Yeah. I mean, the irony and the sort of democratic alarm bells that should be ringing. How did you read that opinion?
Yeah, we were joking about what's the silver lining here, and we said at least no one joined Thomas's concurrence. I mean, because he literally wants to repeal the 20th century. Yes. I mean, that's what he's trying to do here. I mean, throwing shade at Brown versus Board of Education on the 70th anniversary of that decision, saying he wants to overturn the one person, one vote rulings, which Earl Warren said were the most important rulings of that court, saying that you can't challenge racial gerrymandering or vote dilution ever, which would basically gut all of the 14th and 15th Amendment. So he's basically saying from Reconstruction onwards, from the 1860s and 70s onwards, we should repeal all of that. And we should go back to the day, ironically, when black people have no rights and other racially disenfranchised minorities have no rights. And it's just the fact that, yes, it's only concurrence, but the fact that he's even putting this out there. Yeah. What we see is a lot of times these radical concurrences, they then become the thing that the lower courts pick up on, and then it goes back for the Supreme Court. Right. So don't ignore this, because this would be coming back sooner rather than later. Well, it reminds me, Dahlia, of the Dobbs decision, where Thomas is suggesting gay marriage may be the next thing to fall. I mean, it's a matter of shifting the Overton window, moving the goalpost down the field and saying, oh, maybe we should rethink Brown. Now, that may not be the immediate impact of all of this, but it does sort of set a new goal for the right, does it not?
It does, and it emboldens, as Ari says, lower court judges who are trying out constantly for the Supreme Court to be like, I'm going to read that Thomas dissent as the majority opinion, and I'm going to write it into law and just take a big swing and see what happens. And we've got case after case this term at the Supreme Court that are born of that kind of zealotry. And I think the really important thing that Ari is saying and that we shouldn't miss is that today, like, it's easy to get hyper-focused on the flags and hyper-focused on the sort of intramural crazy happening at the court. But the court just eviscerated the Reconstruction Amendments. For all intents and purposes, the court said that the amendments that promised a freer, fuller participatory democracy are essentially unenforceable. And for us to sit around and be like, this can't go any farther, Clarence Thomas is pretty much telling us he's willing to take it farther. Just jump on and enjoy the ride.
Repeal the 20th century, from Clarence Thomas, Justice on the Supreme Court. Ari Berman, Dahlia Lithwick, thank you for your time and your wisdom. I'm not going to say calming words because I'm more alarmed than I ever have been. But thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate you.
Thank you.